Hi, I'm Rabbi Hammer, and this is Simply Mental Health. I remind you after I finish to please subscribe below and send me your questions and thoughts. I welcome to hear from you. I want to share with you today something that seems very simple, but nonetheless very important for us to understand and to inculcate. And that is, someone shared with me recently that they're dealing with their child and they're not sure if the child has gone through a specific trauma-related issue, but they're having obsessive and compulsive thoughts in their mind and they're trying to filter them, but they're having a very, very difficult time as such. And they're flooded with a tremendous amount of thoughts. And they're not sure what to do. Is it trauma-related? Is it OCD? What do they do? Is it anxiety disorder? Where do they turn to? And it's interesting because at first, when I was discussing it with someone, they were telling me, well, perhaps we should try and find this particular person a trauma specialist, someone who deals with different trauma issues, such as trauma therapies like EMDR, or trauma therapies like somatic therapy, or CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which are skill-based therapies and teach a person how to filter their thoughts based on skills in breaking them down and compartmentalizing their thoughts as such, making it easier for the person to deal with those flood of thoughts that might come into their mind. And then someone else said to me, well, maybe this person is suffering from OCD or an anxiety disorder, in which case it wouldn't really be channeling towards skill-based therapy, but more based on cognitive therapy and speaking to that person and dealing with the trauma or dealing with the issues at hand that are important to get to and to confront directly. And finally, being confused in terms of how exactly or what exactly to weigh and measure, I spoke to a psychologist friend of mine who I trust tremendously, and she told me a tremendous insight. She said, if someone has or needs an angioplast, right, God forbid, in their heart or in their arteries, they don't go to an angioplast specialist. They go to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist can then assess how their heart is doing in general. Is their heart strong enough for the procedure? Is that procedure of angioplasty the right way to go? What other procedures might be more appropriate? What other things we should consider around the particular procedure, and so on and so forth. In other words, you go to a broad specialist who's able to give you direction as such, because they have a much more broad perspective and can offer much broader and ultimately productive advice. The same thing, she said, is with regards to the mind, to cognition, to psychology. If someone, we're not sure if they're suffering from trauma-related issues, anxiety, or an OCD disorder, well, go to someone who really specializes on all, who has a broad perspective, a psychologist who's been trained in many, many areas, and therefore, when they experiment, because the mind is obviously a very complex thing, when they experiment, discuss, converse with that person in therapy, they can figure out, slowly but surely, and identify what particular problem and diagnosis this person has and which specific therapy should be adhered to and should be administered as such. It might sound very fundamental and basic, but sometimes we get so wrapped up with looking for that expert in their particular area that we forget. Perhaps we're better served finding a person who can survey at large and slowly figure things out and, as such, suggest the therapy according to that person's particular need. It is extremely important that we find the right therapy for the particular and right problem. There's nothing worse, as a friend of mine likes to say, there's nothing worse than having the worst than having no therapy is having the wrong or bad therapy. And so it would do us well to try and find those people who can really work in a number of areas and as such help that person. Thank you for joining me today in Simply Mental Health. Again, I remind you, subscribe below, send me your questions and comments. I welcome to hear from you. Have a wonderful day.